I'm Hardy Brooklyn. I'm a life coach that's based in Brooklyn, New York. I have been working with people to help them set boundaries and as well give consent for over 10 years now. And I've transitioned to becoming a life coach. And this is a little workshop for people that want to help other people understand how to set boundaries and how better to set the boundaries themselves. I have two great people that are part of my Daring Success team on here today as well. I'm going to go ahead and let them quickly introduce themselves. Isabel?
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Isabel Nanin. I'm a women's empowerment coach, and I help professional, introverted women and female entrepreneurs to turn their fears into success and productivity.
Anna?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anna. I'm a life coach. I'm based in Italy, Milan. And I help mom thrive after the kids leave by rediscovering, redesigning, and reimagining their lives with fulfillment and purpose.
Thank you. So, in any situation, people need to know what their boundaries are and be able to clearly define them and communicate them to others. So, we're going to start this with I'm going to ask you a quick question. So, if you can go ahead and answer this question for me, that would be great. And it is, what is a boundary to you? So, there's a little poll pop up on your screen. And we're going to have about 9 or 10 of these throughout the workshop. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So we're just going to basically, my question to everybody is, Eric, since you weren't able to type it, what is a boundary to you?
A boundary is a statement or a rule made concerning any engagement. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'm having a tough time putting it more concisely than that.
One of the respondents wrote, what keeps me safe? Maybe space, maybe clothes, maybe my manner, maybe inner beliefs. That's closer. What about my two lovely other coaches? What do you think boundary is?
Well, for me, it's a limit, putting a limit like boundaries, limit, border. And it's putting my needs first and put like a limit as what do I want or what do I agree to do? Or am I okay to do that? Is it good for me, my needs over people's needs or what they want me to do?
Anna, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, exactly as Isabel says. I think it's a limit, but it's a limit for ourselves. It's not a limit that we put on other people. It's just the way we want to be treated and talked to, and people not what's the word, not taking advantage of our time, of our resources. It's like a protection. I don't know how to define.
So, for the purposes of this workshop, a boundary is a limit that you set on what you will accept of another person's words or actions. It's what you're going to accept on another person's words or actions. So, the next question I have for you is, hopefully Eric will maybe be able to answer those. If not, we'll just do them out loud. Um, Here are some other questions that are around boundaries that are, why are good boundaries important? If you can get a chance to like answer these, that would be great. Why are good boundaries important? What are 4 types of boundaries? And how do you communicate these boundaries? And what questions work around respecting and enforcing boundaries? Why other people resist or challenge boundaries? And what do you do when a boundary is violated? When I work with my clients to try to get them to understand why good boundaries are important, it involves asking them a lot of questions about what they want to protect in themselves and what they understand about a boundary and who's enforcing it. And those questions have to be put in a way that really defines the difference between a boundary and a rule. Because if we're trying to define why a good boundary is important, and the questions that we're asking around that good boundary are leading us down the road of creating rules, it's not going to be very productive for that conversation or that client or the person we're working with. So questions about good boundaries are important. Do people always ask you a question when you're maybe annoyed? Do people always ask you questions when you're super excited? Do people make you feel uncomfortable? And then we come to, after we figure out whether they're important or not, we have to understand what four boundaries we can kind of work around and how they kind of fall into buckets so that we can kind of convey them and explain them in a way to other people. So does anybody know what are the four types of boundaries when you're dealing with consent?
I think I know three.
Okay.
One is physical boundaries, another one is resource boundaries, and another one is mental and emotional boundaries.
Mental and emotional are basically kept separately. So you actually got all four of them. Material things, time, favors, services, physical things. The next one is physical slash sexual. Body, my personal space. Can you touch me? What kinks do I like? How do I like the way you look at me? The next is mental, which is your brain, what your thoughts are, what your value system is, what your belief is, and what your opinions are. And then lastly, emotional, what my feelings are and what are other people's feelings. And I try to start with my clients with the material because it's the easiest for people to grasp. And the first question I ask my clients is, you just bought your favorite car. You have the most amazing car you want. It has every bell and whistle. It costs you all the money in the world. And you finally get to drive it. And every single weekend, people want to borrow it. And they're constantly asking you to borrow it. How does that make you feel? And that's the feeling that I try to ask them to kind of explain. Because when you take something that people don't like what you're doing, or they just take it, or, oh, I need to run my friend to the airport. I'm just going to grab the keys and take your car. For a lot of people, you might be okay with it once or twice, or maybe after the car's a couple of months old. But in the beginning, it's my brand new baby. I just put my heart and soul into it. So how do we create those questions for our clients around every single aspect of their life? Whether it's people calling you after 10 o'clock at night, whether it's your mother calling you and telling you you should go get a master's degree every time she picks up the phone and talks to you, whether it's somebody that keeps slapping you on the ass because they think it's cool and they like the response that they get. So it doesn't matter really what it is. We try to ask questions to our clients so that they create the questions in their head of what makes them comfortable in the world? What makes me feel safe? What gives me the ability to move forward in a positive manner? And if people that always talk about negative things or something that you don't like, How do we set that boundary? And the way that we get our clients to is, who is crossing the boundary? Who is making me feel uncomfortable? And then the answer is why? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? Because if my mom tells me to go get a PhD, I'm going to react a certain way mentally. If Eric tells me to go get a PhD, I'm going to react differently. I might not be okay with my mom asking me or talking to me about those type of topics, but I'm okay with Eric because there's no baggage there. It's not meant in a putting you down way because of other things around that topic. So what I'm trying to bring out there is, when we're communicating with our clients, they have to understand who's crossing that boundary and why they're crossing the boundary. Because different people interact with you about the same exact thing in different ways, with different baggage, with different limiting beliefs. So different people cross my boundaries and don't cross my boundaries around certain things. What's the intent of a boundary? That's the one of the things that I want to kind of really ask people. What's the intent of a boundary? Eric?
Now communicating a need um concerning oneself rather than a rule. I can distinguish a rule and a boundary, but that's not again something I can concisely say, other than a rule is about how others act, and a boundary is about what your needs and what your desires are, independent of what others are doing.
So when you want to think about the intent of boundaries, think about it from the positive side of the world. The intent of a boundary in my mind, and I try to get people to understand this, is it's to improve my relationship and it's to improve the quality of my life. So if I'm trying to put a boundary around someone that I sort of like doing certain things with, but there are some things that I really despise doing those things with them. And a good example is, I love going hiking with my wife. I love going camping with my wife. One thing that one thing that she really hates is going cycling with me. So she has a boundary. I am not allowed to ask her, talk to her, or anything about cycling, because that all of a sudden, in her mind, pictures me getting crushed by a truck or a car, because I'm an incredibly reckless bike rider, according to everybody in the world. I ride fast, I don't pay attention, and I zip through traffic. But that's a boundary. And I know that if I break that boundary, it's not going to be improving my relationship. It's going to be making it rocky road. And now that great date night is no longer a great date night because I did something wrong. And whatever her reaction is to that, it should be expected. Unless it's, oh, I still love you. I know you didn't mean it. But obviously I meant it because I said it.
Hardy, I think it's respect. The word which comes to my mind straight away is respect. Is respect ourselves and respect the relationship. So it's I respect my needs. I'm being authentic, but at the same time, I respect the difference, right? And I respect the relationship. So we are together, we do things, and I respect that you don't like things that you were saying with your wife. And for me, the first thing which comes to mind is respect.
Thank you. Yes, that's really a good word to add to that. I'm going to add that to my notes after. So how do we ask those questions of our clients? What do we ask our clients to think about? What do we bring to our clients? And when I think about the questions about it, it's always about positive feelings. What do you want to do with that person? And then think about when that person just makes you not want to like embrace them and hug them and kiss them. And if we think about those activities, it gives us a good basis to start with what those boundaries we're going to put on ourselves are. And go ahead, Pat.
So for me, from what you just said, I actually come to what's a boundary from negative. I don't think it isn't like, oh, I like the biking. It's that you know, I don't like the getting cold at night camping. I mean, it's the negative. Or the person who doesn't get off the plane like they should because we're going to be at the end of the customs line. Um, so it's, you know, I wouldn't find my way through this to a positive, or my experiences. I don't think I do.
So
It's
let
like, yeah,
so let me ask you a question about the plane.
okay.
What can you do about that situation? And how is that person violating your boundary?
Well, when we were number 500 in the line, he understood why I was trying to push him off the plane. And so he learned the next time we got on a plane why I was, you know, getting my act together and you know, so it was and hopefully the learning from the experience. And then if there's not a learned experience, then I'm not going to do that with them again.
So my question to you is you're 500th online to get off the plane.
Right.
What what is this person doing that's violating a boundary to you that's different than the rules of society or as far as exiting a plane?
Well, that particular situation had not happened to me before. I'd been traveling with other experienced travelers. This was a guy who was a traveler, but not the kind of traveler I was. And so I didn't know that he didn't know. So actually part of the pissed offness was, besides his behavior, it was that it was only afterwards that I realized I had not, I didn't know I needed to communicate to him that we need to be ready and get off the plane fast because otherwise blah, 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 blah. So the anger was at him and at myself.
So the question I have for you is what would have happened if you were the last person off the plane in that situation?
You know, we just spent 2 hours till we got our luggage, you know. I mean, that's not the end of the world, but you know, it's 2 hours when, I don't know, maybe we had a date for dinner, or, you know, somebody was
Okay.
picking us up.
So now how do we redefine that boundary in a more positive way? Because the boundary is basically the way that I look at it is I will not travel with people that do not put speed as a priority when we're getting in and out of transportation modes.
Well, that was the Taipei airport, which was an insane place to go through customs. Getting off at LaGuardia is going to be a different experience. So it's time, place, purpose, kind of traveling. So there's a lot of qualifiers. It's not an all or nothing.
Right. So then how would you in the future, if this person came up to you and said they wanted to travel with you, how would you present your boundary?
I might ask, so now I need to know how well I know them. If it's somebody I really have never, like somebody I've never, going to the parade last night, I went with people who had been to the parade before. Other years I've gone with people who had not been to the parade. It was the identical experience to the airplane. They didn't understand why we had to why we had to leave early, why we had to get, you know, go a certain way, and why we had to rush. Whereas everyone I went with last night, we all knew. Everyone had already done it. And one guy who sort of didn't know was well guided by the gal he was with.
So is it a boundary that you're talking about, or is it the situation where you need to create a boundary on yourself that says, I'm not going to travel with anybody until I explain my travel style and make sure they're okay with that?
I don't know. These are really, you know, this is like a simple word with a really lot of complexity to it.
Yes, it is.
And what it does to me actually is it triggers me pretty deeply, actually. Um, uh,
When we're coaches, and
Yeah.
a little bit is geared towards coaches was the purpose of this workshop is that's what we have to be aware of when we're working with our clients.
mm,
Because that deep triggering, you know, by the time we drill down to see if we actually spent the time to drill down with Pat to figure out what that actual boundary should be in a positive manner, it might take 2 weeks. It might take her going home and crying about something else before we actually realize it. Because it brings up other emotions and other things in ourselves. And for people and for society today, we're so used to going to the easy route of let's just make it a rule. Let's not make it a boundary. Let's figure out how we can make it something that it would, like, for instance, in this situation, I can see it either being like you have to come with me fast. You have to run. Let's go. Rah, 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 rah.
yes.
Instead of upfront saying the boundary with myself is I don't travel with anybody unless we sit down, we have a conversation, and I explain to them my travel style and what they're going to do that's going to make me snap at them or whatever you want to do. And the more information you put in it, that discussion, the better it's going to be.
But there had to be the first airplane experience. I mean, it was so distinctly like a big one that, like, I still haven't forgotten it 20 years later.
Right.
Uh, so that, but it makes me aware that to go somewhere with somebody, I need to think about these things. And if I haven't thought about it and it's starting to happen, then I have to I either extract myself or breathe into it.
And that's good. And one of the things that I've realized is that I try to think about a boundary on myself anytime I feel myself having some anxiety come on,
Mhm.
or any kind of heart rate increase, or any kind of emotion that isn't super fun. And even a lot of the super funs I've had to put boundaries on to keep me from getting in trouble. But when I start feeling like, oh, when I'm thinking about, let's say, traveling with somebody, I used to hate traveling with people because I was like Pat, in, out of the airport. I don't even want to wait for you. There's no check luggage. Screw that, you know? And we're not taking a cab when we get out. We're running to the metro because it's faster, type of thing. And I started to think about it. And when I started to explain to people my travel style, I was able to then find people that traveled just like me. And then some other people, like some of them had partners that were not as quick or as fast or as zippy through the airport or how to check a bag. So I was able to set the boundary around myself that didn't involve me in that situation. So I was able to think it out and said, hey, you guys want to check bags? I'm going to head out to the parking lot. You're going to carry my bag for me because you're checking bags, and I'm going to go smoke weed. And I did that with corporate travel for 10 years. I mean, I would literally give them my little rolly bag. I would walk to the parking lot, get the rental car, smoke a joint, and then go pick them up. That was my job because I couldn't deal with waiting around that stupid carousel
Why did they have to carry your bag?
because they were checking a bag and I was
It-
going to get the car and smoking weed.
But that was your price to them. They had to pay that price to you.
Because, yeah,
Or-
because I had to walk I would walk to the car rental place and then come around and pick them up right at the door. Why should I schlep my bag to the car rental place?
You guys have been talking about boundaries. I think a lot more than I'm knowledgeable about. I I used to have the word consent and boundaries. They're all mingled for me still. But it's the way we're.
And that hold on one second. And that is a huge problem that we run into as coaches because there were so many people in the adult play world, the burner community, the burlesque community, the and this is where and those are the ones that do the best at it. Then we talk about the fish community, the jam band, the EDM, and all these other communities. They mix them all in together. They
Mhm.
don't look at them as two separate things. And the biggest thing that people have to realize is consent is when you give somebody permission to violate any type of boundary. Invading my personal space is a boundary. So you're giving consent.
I understand that, but I would never have thought of getting off the plane in an efficient manner as a boundary.
But it's not a boundary. It's you're not going to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be hanging around people that don't get off the plane the same way as you.
And so that's a personal boundary.
Correct.
I would have just thought of that as like a preference.
It's
A boundary
it's
is like
not.
it's such a bigger word.
So if it's a preference, that means you have no problem. You prefer people that go fast, but you'll get on the plane with anyone. Just like my wife. She has no problem going hiking. She has no problem going rock climbing, but she will not get on any situation that's a bicycle in a city. But
Okay.
she'll get on a bicycle in a state park because it's a different environment. And that's where the boundaries come in. And it's not a preference. She doesn't prefer to ride in the state park. There's no way she's riding down Fifth Avenue on a bicycle.
Right.
Even if there's like people chasing her with machine guns.
Please let's not joke like that.
So just to kind of move on, yes,
Yep.
boundaries are very complicated. This is a brief workshop on just to start to ask those questions to yourself. And then one of the things that we have to also get our clients to understand is how do we change the statements and the questions about the boundaries? So when we're trying to communicate to our clients, we want to have them be able to ask questions of themselves and of the people around them and make statements that are assertive, but not aggressive. You need to be assertive, but not aggressive. You need to be standing up for yourself and stating your position while without doing any attacking of the other person. You cannot make the other person feel less for what they're doing because it's something, because what you're saying you don't like, there's going to be 10 billion other people in this planet that are totally okay with that. And I learned that in the Halloween parade last night. The cops were okay with when people came, some cops with the blue shirts were okay with when people came over to talk to me and they stopped the bus so it couldn't move anymore because I was right in front of the bus. But the cops with the dark black shirts and the white shirts were like, you can't stop the bus because we want to go home. And they would push everybody out of the way so the bus can keep going. And it went back and forth between the two of them for about 45 minutes before we finally got to the end of the route at 11 o'clock. But it was interesting seeing how some of those cops were assertive. So the people that had the light blue shirts on, when they were talking to the crowd, they were assertive and people were moving out of their way. When you had the regular cops that were in the regular blue uniforms and the white shirts, they were being aggressive. And the difference that I noticed was the assertive cops had their hands in their pockets most of the time or were on their phone. The aggressive cops were constantly having to push, constantly having to run into people. And that reaction of the people was very different.
Mm-hmm.
When a community officer walked up to you, people got out of their way. It was not a big deal. But when the other officers had already been seen pushing other people, people put a wall up and didn't, oh, come on, what are you doing? Go fuck yourself. I could be here. And it was seeing that. And what I saw was the same thing. Be polite, be calm, and be confident. So we ask our clients, what do you think questions and what do you think actions would be great when you're trying to convey that boundary that I only travel with people that don't check a bag, that are in zone 1 for boarding and exiting, and all of these other things. So how do we ask questions that are polite, calm, and confident without being insulting? How would I do it? Hey, Mike, when you travel, how much luggage do you take? Like, do you pay for those extra bags or you just get with the free stuff? If they say I spend $300 on luggage, I don't need to go any further because they're not someone I want to travel with. If they say, yeah, I might check a small bag because I don't want to carry it on or something like that, then I can continue to my next question. How quickly do you want to get off that plane at the end? Like, how quickly do you want to go smoke a cigarette or stretch your legs or whatever it is? So I'm asking a question around the positivity of it, or asking them what they'd like to do. If the guy's like, oh, I wait for everybody and then I leisurely stroll off, it allows me to ask another question or end the conversation there because I've decided that I don't want to be with that person.
And what happens if they say to you, Hardy, I'm going into the city. I have tickets to see Depeche Mode at Madison Square Garden, center, center floor seats.
And
And you have to travel. You're in Philadelphia for some reason.
depends on there are people who I have literally turned down tickets to major places because I did not want to travel with them.
And what did you say? Or you already know that they're slow getting off the plane and they travel with luggage. So you know that you don't want to travel with them. How do you tell them that you don't want to travel with them?
Well, I would basically tell them that first I would see if we can meet there. Two, I say I have no problem saying this, but that's me. I have a very different traveling style than you. And based on the type of travel, when I travel with people like you, I just want to blow my brains out. So, but I'm also picky about travel. So, and if it doesn't work, and I'm like, there are some people that it just doesn't work with.
And it's
And
not going to work with you.
correct. And if they maybe they'll take an Amtrak if it's possible. Maybe they'll take a different mode of transportation. Maybe they'll just meet me at the destination. I mean, I have a very good friend in the burner community that we do not travel well together,
Uh-huh.
but we just meet each other there. It's not the big deal.
Very provocative. I'm going to have to go, and I'm really sorry I have to go. This has been a great
Thank you.
conversation. It sort of became a one-to-one between. I hope that was okay. Our interaction. It
Yeah, I
was
think it's going to be great. I'm going to use you as a video person.
dear. Okay. All right. Let's talk next week. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye,
Thank
Pat.
you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Happy honor
Bye.
all of our ancestors today.
Yes.
Made us
Bye.
and gave us everything we have today. Bye.
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 So I'm going to continue the presentation for people that are watching remotely, even though all of our lovely guests have disappeared. So one of the things when we're continuing it is we have to ask our clients, how can they state their boundaries? And if they want to, how can they state a preferred action or an alternative action for the person that's violating their boundaries? So a good example of that would be, hey, we don't travel on a plane well together. Let's take two different methods. Let's meet each other there. And it's not worth it to argue, apologize, or make excuses for your boundaries because when you do that, when you argue and make excuses for your boundaries, one of the things that happens is you put yourself in a defensive mode and you start questioning the boundary. Never question it. It's your feeling, it's your deepness, it's your heart, what makes you feel good in a positive manner. And then the biggest thing that we ask our clients, and this is where I'm going to sort of get ready to wrap it up because the biggest things that we have to teach our clients and work with our clients on is what type of challenges happen to the boundaries. And there are two immense challenges. The first is internal, all of my limiting beliefs, all of my fears, all of my questioning myself, more of my comparing myself, all of the FOMO that I'm going to have if I don't do it. Am I going to be liked? All of those internal things that are going around in our head. And we have to start to get our clients to ask those questions to get past that, especially like the travel. Oh, the person's not going to like me. It's not going to give me the Depeche Mode tickets. Guaranteed the person would have no problem meeting her there. As far as, I mean, the plane experience is so refreshing. And then the external change is hard. if you haven't been doing boundaries with people, it is very hard for people to accept change when you haven't never done them, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, all of a sudden you got all these rules. Well, you need to make sure you constantly remind them that they're boundaries, that they're invisible. You can't see them, their emotions and their feelings and their positivity. Because what boundaries are come from is me not feeling good, me wanting to feel better. So we put those around them. And who's responsible for enforcing them? Isabel got it. That's it. You are responsible for enforcing your boundaries, and only you. You might ask somebody for help, but you are basically the main referee in the game. And you have to respect yourself so that you can enforce that boundary. And you cannot expect other people to enforce them for you. And I work with my clients to ask those questions. What am I going to do to enforce the boundary? How am I going to enforce the boundary? When am I going to enforce the boundary? How many times am I going to interact with somebody that I have to keep enforcing the boundary? So we keep putting those things out there because they're important. And when we start asking our clients questions around those topics, it gives them a bigger picture and it makes it easier to implement the change. Because now I know, so for instance, I'm pretty sure my wife will keep going on dates with me if I keep asking her to go bike riding. It would just go poorly, but we'll still have the experience. And eventually I won't want to go because it's not going to be pleasant for me. And that leads me to the final question of the workshop. What do I do when my boundary is violated? Depends on the situation. Number one is do not ask the other person to change their behavior. It's not the other person's responsibility to change their behavior. It's up to you to call a stop and halt and take yourself out of the situation or use your words to communicate the situation. Depending on what type of boundary it was violated, sometimes the authorities have to be called. Sometimes law enforcement needs to get involved. But once that boundary is violated, it's your responsibility to protect yourself, take yourself out of the situation, and speak up. And I always say, when you're taking yourself out of a situation, hey, I need to go. My boundary of X, Y, and Z was violated. I just need to get a breath. You need to communicate what was violated to the people so they understand why you're leaving. And that's it. Don't justify, don't make excuses, don't give a big deal explanation. My boundary was violated around people talking about riding in traffic, and be done. That's it. Get up, change the conversation, leave the room, go to the bathroom, go meditate somewhere, do something to take yourself out of the situation so that you can reset your frontal lobe. So you're the anxious, all of those negative emotions can kind of dwindle away. And as coaches, don't give up. As we saw with the people that were on the call, it's hard. It's going to take time. It's going to take months and weeks. I've been working on boundaries myself since around probably 10 years now. And I am like 2% in because I'm constantly learning new things. I'm constantly learning new strategies and I'm constantly learning new techniques. And if you want to learn more about boundaries and you get to watch this before November 7th, on Tuesday, November 7th, we're going to actually have a boundaries workshop for coaches at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check us out at daringsuccessteam.com or look for us on LinkedIn or Facebook for our upcoming workshops. I have been Hardy Brooklyn, giving you a brief overview of how to coach a little bit or how to set boundaries. and hopefully I will see you in the future. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody. Later.